It all started the other day when I was creating a new character. I had a pretty good origin story, but I found that it was similar to RoboCop. I mean, sort of. I wasn't going to create a robo whatever, but I did have a character who died and was resurrected and sought out those who betrayed him. Hang 'em High did something similar, although Clint Eastwood's character didn't die, but there was a kind of a symbolic death at the beginning. Anyway, the point is, I wasn't worried because the idea was sort of like RoboCop. I mean, similarities happen. What I was worried about was I couldn't see what came after the origin story. You know, I had a powerful beginning, but I didn't know if I had a character that could carry more stories. And because it was so much like RoboCop, RoboCop bothered me because RoboCop had one phenomenal movie and then never really found a successful sequel, or a reboot for that matter. So I did what I always did and obsessed about it for a long time, and I started wondering why did RoboCop fail so hard when it came to the sequels. The first film was phenomenal. It's a gold standard in storytelling, if you ask me. So why did RoboCop 2 come across as so blah? And why was RoboCop 3 such a giant turd that wouldn't flush? I churned this problem over in my mind, and other characters have had successful sequels, so what went wrong with RoboCop? And finally it came to me in a flash of brilliance, as most of my ideas do, that the writers didn't understand why RoboCop worked in the first place. And that's the secret that I want to show you. How understanding your character can give you endless opportunities. That may not be the right title for this, but anyway. More specifically, how understanding the story engine underneath your character can tell you what kind of sequels or series or episodes that character actually belongs in. The gimmick gets people in the door. The engine is what keeps the story moving. All right, let me explain all this because I'm rattling on here. RoboCop was cool. Man, when I was a kid, the first time I saw that, oh God, it was such an awesome movie. And it had everything an 80s cop movie could ever want. Excessive violence and brutal fight scenes and high-tech cyborgs slugging it out with giant two-legged robots. I mean, what more could you ask for? And we got exactly that in RoboCop 2. So why didn't it work? Spectacle was never the problem. Meaningless spectacle. That was the problem. RoboCop 2 failed because they forgot about Murphy, the cop. They thought that it was about big robots slugging it out. Now, when Murphy had been reborn into RoboCop, he had all the cool stuff that a cyborg should have. But at his core, RoboCop was Murphy, and Murphy was still a cop. He patrolled the city being a cop. He investigated his own murder, which you got to admit is pretty cool. And because he investigated like a cop, he uncovered corruption at the top of the very corporation that created him, OCP. RoboCop was a cop first and foremost, and throughout the film, he was a cool cyborg second. He was a cop before they killed him, and he was a cop after they rebuilt him, and the cyborg shell was the gimmick. The arc was Murphy reclaiming himself, but the engine was a cop following a case through a rotten city. At its core, RoboCop was a cop movie, and Murphy never stopped being a cop. I don't know how many times I've said that, but I'm repeating it. And that's what they forgot in RoboCop 2. And in a bit, I'm going to fix RoboCop 2 a little, not to be presumptuous, but I'm going to do it to illustrate how this dynamic of character could have saved the sequel and the franchise if the writers had understood what made Murphy to begin with. Let's take a look at a character that writers understood, and that was Mad Max. The first film is radically different from the sequels. The first film is a cop revenge tragedy in a world falling apart, but you can't do that again in the second film. That story is done. It's kaput. He can't go through that again. So the writers pivoted. They kept the character, and they changed the story. The writers knew that the character had formed in the first film. So the second film turns Mad Max into the wandering Ronin, the lone gunman, kind of the man with no name figure in the post-apocalyptic wasteland. They give a brief overview of Max's origin at the very beginning of the film, and then they use the man that was created by that origin. And one way to look at it is that the first film creates Mad Max. The sequels use Mad Max. And that's the difference between repeating an origin and finding an engine. A completed arc does not mean the character is dead. It may mean the character is ready to become a story engine. Anybody remember Kung Fu? It's an awesome television show. Keep that in mind. Let's take a look at Luke Skywalker. After Return of the Jedi, Luke's hero's journey is complete. He has rejected hatred. He has redeemed his father. He has faced the Emperor. He has become the Jedi he needed to become. So you don't need to keep dragging him back through the same old will he become Darth Vader arc forever. He's done. He's the Jedi that he was meant to be. I know I've talked about this in a couple of other videos, but it bears repeating that just because he was done with his arc doesn't mean that Luke had no stories left. It meant that the type of story changes. He becomes the wandering Jedi, the knight errant, the paladin, the lone ranger, the knight rider. Well, I mean, I could go on and on, but he'd be the formed hero who enters other people's trouble and changes the situation by being there. And I've said this before too. Can you imagine a TV show with Luke wandering from place to place like Cain from Kung Fu? I mean, wouldn't that have been so cool? And it would have worked because Luke was ready to be that kind of character. Moving on, another thing to remember is that a fully formed character, one that has completed his arc, has become the person they will be for the rest of their lives. They can still carry stories. And you don't need to know their origin story to do it. Not every character needs an origin story. Oh, you can give them one, but, the reader doesn't, or the viewer doesn't need it. Let's go back to the old classics that I like to use. Kirk and Picard. Fully formed characters that can still carry stories. And Kirk and Picard, they're not interesting because they become new men in every episode. They are interesting because they are already formed men whose values are tested by new situations. And that is episodic storytelling. The drama comes from pressure, not constant reinvention. A formed character is not a finished character. Sometimes a formed character is exactly what episodic storytelling needs. You can have a fully formed character that can still learn a lesson once in a while, just like Kirk and Picard. And this ties back to one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in storytelling gospel. Your character should be different by the end of the story. Why? Why does a character have to be deconstructed and reassembled for every story? It's tedious. It's boring. It's bad advice. More interesting? Take a character who is fully formed, complete with values and convictions, and pit him against a situation where those values are tested and maybe even questioned. Now that's storytelling. A classic example, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Kirk believes in Star Trek. Kirk believes in Starfleet. He believes in friendship and loyalty. But when it's put to the test, he puts loyalty first, and he sacrifices his career in Starfleet to save his friend Spock. Not every protagonist needs a massive new transformation arc every time. Sometimes the story is about testing who they already are. Okay, so let's get back to RoboCop. I'm not into fixing stories, but I I want to show you how a story could be saved by simply understanding the character. Now watch how fast a stronger sequel emerges once you understand what made the movie work, the first movie. I'm going to keep as much of the original RoboCop 2 as I can here, so bear with me. The thing you've got to remember is that Murphy is a cop, as if I haven't said that enough. He was a cop at the end of the first film, he's got to be a cop in the sequel. Or else you change the type of story that you're telling, like they did with Mad Max, Mad Max 2. But we're not going to do that here. We've established that RoboCop is at his core a cop. It's a cop story with chrome bolted on. So if you don't have something for a cop to investigate, you don't have a cop movie. You have a movie about a person who happens to be a cop, which is pretty much what we got in RoboCop 2. So to be fair, now RoboCop 2 has a lot of the right ingredients already. You've got Cain and Nuke and OCP trying to build a replacement RoboCop, the dead cop candidates, the big cyborg fight. And I'm not saying that none of that belongs. I'm saying that the movie needed Murphy's investigation to be the spine holding these things, all these pieces together. And from what I can tell, this isn't just me imagining things after the fact. The production history seems to point all in the same direction. This does not look like it was one writer sitting alone in a room and just not understanding RoboCop. There was a cluster bunk in the making of this sequel. The original RoboCop writers, forgive me if I've mispronounced this, but it was Edward Numir and Michael Miner. They had started working on a sequel, but there was a Writers Guild strike and threw a wrench into all that, and Orion started developing other versions while everything else was tied up. Frank Miller was brought in, and I am not laying anything at Frank Miller's feet. He's a very highly regarded writer, and the script went through a lot of changes, and Waylon Green was brought in to rewrite. Orion apparently wanted the movie made fast, and even Peter Weller, that's the actor who played RoboCop, he said that RoboCop 2 didn't have the code or the spine or the soul of the first movie. He said that when he asked where the third act was, the answer was basically, the monster is going to be enough. And that right there is the whole problem. The monster was never going to be enough. The big cyborg fight at the end of the movie was not going to make this movie work. It wasn't the engine. Murphy was the engine. As it is, there's a lot going on in the film that sometimes seems random and unconnected, and it could have been tighter, and Cain's conversion to RoboCop 2 could have been much more thematically related to Murphy's investigation. So what does this movie need? It needed Murphy to be on a case, and the case needed to tie in all of the disparate elements of the film. Murphy starts out much like he does. Let's keep it the same as I can here. Murphy starts out much like he does in the actual film. You've got Cain, you've got Nuke, murdered cops, street violence, Detroit collapsing, and there's public panic. Murphy investigates Cain because Murphy is a cop, and Cain is the problem right in front of him. But as Murphy digs, the case starts pointing somewhere that it shouldn't. And this is where I'm going to deviate a little bit here. So OCP has learned the wrong lesson from the first film. Murphy exposed one of their top men because he was still a cop. His investigation led him to Dick Jones, the ultimate upper management bad guy, and OCP doesn't want their own creations taking down their own people. So Murphy's existence has created a problem for them. They want to sell RoboCop as a product line, but the prototype keeps acting like a man. Worse, he keeps acting like a cop, and cops investigate. So OCP decides that the problem was Murphy. Too much Murphy in the machine. RoboCop with a conscience is dangerous to OCP. They don't want another Murphy. They want RoboCop without Murphy. Now Cain and the Nuke crisis becomes useful. OCP is not just failing to stop Cain, they are using the crisis. Maybe they're feeding it, maybe they're steering it, maybe they're letting good cops die because dead cops are useful to the RoboCop 2 program. And at first they try cops, just like they do in the actual film, but because that makes sense on paper. Murphy was a cop, so find another cop. But the cops come with the same problem Murphy had. They have duty and conscience and loyalty and a tendency to follow evidence back to the people signing the checks. So OCP decides that maybe a different candidate would make a better cyborg law enforcement officer. Not better morally, better for OCP. Easier to steer, easier to leash, less likely to follow the evidence back to the boardroom. So now you've got the head of you've got the head of the RoboCop 2 program, and they decide to use Cain himself, violent, selfish, dependent, and controllable through addiction. OCP thinks they want RoboCop without a conscience, and that's exactly what they're going to get. And we still get to keep our big cyborg battle at the end, because let's be honest, a big fight between two cyborgs is freaking cool. That's blockbuster cinema. That's what I paid to go see. That's what I want. The problem was never the spectacle. The problem was that the spectacle had no meaning. With our little twist of with our little rewriting of the script here, the battle means something. Murphy he's not just fighting a bigger robot. He's fighting the very thing that OCP wishes he had been. All force, no conscience, a weapon wearing a badge, law without the humanity, power without the compassion. OCP wanted RoboCop without Murphy, and that is exactly what they get, and Murphy has to save them from their own creation. The irony is delicious. The man was not the flaw in RoboCop. The man was the only reason RoboCop worked. Just with understanding this is a lesson for writers and storytellers. Don't confuse the surface of the character with the soul of the story. The surface is what the audience sees first. It's the armor, the badge, the gun, the cape, the sword, the robot body. That's the genre dressing. The engine is underneath. When you're building a sequel, a series, or even just the next chapter, ask yourself, what is this character really, once I strip away all the cool stuff? Not what they look like, not what category they fit in, not what their gimmick is. What do they do? What kind of trouble do they belong in? What kind of story wakes up when they walk into the room? And that is where RoboCop 2 lost the thread. The makers of the film saw the machine, and they forgot the cop. And once you forget the cop, you stop giving him cop stories. You start giving him bigger robots and louder violence and more spectacle. And spectacle is not the enemy. Meaningless spectacle is. Because a big cyborg fight at the end of RoboCop 2 should have worked. It should have been awesome. It needed to mean something. Murphy fighting the RoboCop that OCP wished they had created, that's not just action. That's the theme, and that just puts it all together. That would have been the spine of the film. That fight would have meant so much more. But we got the gimmick, we got the armor, and I'm not trying to tell you not to use gimmicks. Gimmicks are awesome, man. Gimmicks are what's on the poster. Gimmicks are what get you in the theater. Use it. Use the armor. Use the robot body. Use the big fight. Just understand what's underneath it. RoboCop was never just the machine. RoboCop was Murphy, and Murphy was a cop. And they forgot that, and that ending had no meaning. RoboCop 2 should have been a cop story throughout, just like the first one. Okay, I've rattled on long enough. I don't know if I've made my point or not, but I hope I did. I hope you learned something. It's just my brain rattling around and coming up with something that I think sounds intelligent, but oftentimes, well, you tell me. Thank you for listening, and all of you have a good day. Bye-bye.